all, thank you everyone for being here, for being supporting arts in the region. We are ABC Latino, we're a media network and non-profit organization, and our mission is to promote economic and cultural developing minorities, especially the Latino community. So that's what we have to do. And for the last 3 months, we have been having Kathy Ray with her beautiful art, and we're really, really pleased to have her. And this is the last day of the show, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experience as an artist and about her art. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Wow, just in time. Just started.
Welcome.
Hi. I go by Kay Ray. I have many names. It's good to be here. And thank you to ABC Latino for giving me this show. And especially Mafi, because she is fierce and fabulous. So thank you so much. She does a lot of work for the community. This is a non-profit organization, so it's not like your regular gallery experience. They do a lot of work in the community, and it's something I'm just really always impressed with. She works very hard. So anyway, my name, as I said, Kay Ray. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, over there, in the middle of the country. In the north, I come from, well, my mother is first generation Mexican, and my grandparents were from Mexico. And my father was non-Latino, but he passed away when I was really young, tragically. I was like 7 years old. So I was raised by my mother's side of the family. So I was raised culturally in a very Mexican environment, even though I lived in a white suburb, basically, you know. Duality plays a big part in my work, in my own identity. Because my father came from money, but he passed away. So, you know, the reason I wasn't raised in the ghetto is because they really helped us out after my father died. But, you know, it was a classic, like, huge family. I grew up with a lot of cousins that were my friends, and even though that was a tragic thing that happened in my life, it was really, I think I just endured because I had a sense of familia as something that's always been, I'm very like into family. And it, you know, was it a perfect family? No, but there was a lot of values that were really helpful. I used to go to Mexico a lot, and I had cousins in Mexico City, so drive in the mountains, go to Mexico City, go to Oaxaca, go to Taxco, and it was just amazing because in the marketplace, the indigenous people, the Catholicism, and so I was exposed to that really young, which I feel really grateful for. I am an artist, you know, I'm a creative person. Like, what does that even mean, you know? What is a creative person? How am I different than anybody else? I'm not sure, but I have always been somebody that had to be creative. And I grew up, also in my family was a lot of painters and musicians, mostly. But my grandfather used to paint murals on the wall of his house, most magnificent. He had such a like flourish, beautiful. You know, but I wasn't, so why did I become a creative person, or why am I? I mean, you know, that's really hard to quantify in any, you know, real way. It's not something you can measure, but I know that I'm a person that always needed to express myself. And I was always an outlier. You know, I always felt outside of everything as a child, even. At times even in my family, because I also am queer, and I knew that at a very young age. And so all of these things shaped me, but it was also hidden. You know, I grew up in a time where being gay was, you know, not cool at all. Not like today. And so there was class, rich and poor, there was race, there was sexuality, all of these dualities that existed within me. And I think it was very fragmented because I had nobody to really mentor. And I think mentorship is vital for human. I mean, it's the best thing, but I didn't have that. So, you know, I tend to be, sometimes a melancholy person, you know. And I'm very emotional, I'm very intense. And if I don't create, I suffer. I actually was a musician for a long time, and that was really why I came to New York City. I was to play music. I was in fashion. I did I'm not going to get into everything, but I used to do makeup and hair, and I used to work with a lot of designers. So I went from basically Minneapolis to like right in the middle of like intense New York City fashion world and, you know, art world. I also was living eventually on the Lower East Side, so I was also part of the art scene that happened there. All of a sudden the Lower East Side went from like a ghetto with a lot of drugs and heroin in Alphabet City to like a lot of artists and creative people moving in, which is, you know, a common occurrence. And all of a sudden everybody had an art gallery. Now I was more into music back then, but I used to go to openings all the time, and it was a great time. It was a great time to be, you know, in the city, very different than it is today. It's hard to explain, but people were just taking risks. I was trying to take risks. I was working in fashion, and I was playing in bands. I always drew, and I always, since I was a child, but I never did it in anything. Music was really something I was much more serious about. And about 6 years ago, my mother died and my best friend died. Two people that were so significant in my life, daily. And I literally woke up one day and I said, I want to have a studio, and I just had a vision. I want to do visual art. So I've only seriously been painting and pursuing this for like, I would say the last 6 years. But I didn't know, you know, I just literally woke up one day and said, this is something I have to do. And I have a big apartment in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I just started to buy paint, and I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, really. You know, painting and visual art is, and I think any art is a combination of two things. It's the creative part, the imagination, and the technique, the skill. I think I had the content and the imagination, but I did not have the skill. I had to learn a lot, and I had to do it mostly on my own. I took classes. I went to YouTube. I love watching, I still do this, I watch a lot of documentaries on artists, famous artists that I love and how they work and how, you know, I find that to be so helpful, and I love it. So I just started to experiment a lot, and I did a lot of work on paper. You know, I'm a pretty visceral painter. I'm a visceral person. A lot of painters, I think, you know, everybody approaches it differently. I have friends, and I know I've read about artists that draw everything out and have everything pre-planned, and they go into a work that way. I tend to not do that. I like to start with a lot of times I have ideas, I write all my ideas down all the time. I have I do it all digitally in notes, so anything I can think of, I have an idea, I have it. Because all my ideas come from when I'm out there in the world. It's never when I sit down, I'm gonna think of ideas. Same with music, writing lyrics. It's like, when I am not thinking about anything too hard, it flows, right? And I don't, anytime I get the part of my brain that is too analytical involved, it can really cut that flow. So I try to remain really open. I also love photography. I love, anywhere you go, this has been my whole life. Like, I remember I like fashion, I love clothes, I love color, I love texture. That's how I view the world, and I can see lines everywhere. I see lines, I see shapes. I can be in a bathroom, and one day, I remember a couple of weeks ago, there was a green and a mauve color in this bathroom, graffiti, and I was like, that's fantastic colors, so I take pictures of it. And I remember, just as an aside, when I had to go to church as a child, and it was in Latin then, Catholic church, so I'd be bored out of my fucking mind. And I did this for years, and I've never forgotten this. I would sit on the end, the only way I could get through it, I'd sit on the end, and I would look at people's shoes as they walked. And I wouldn't look at the design, I would look at only leather shoes. And because I loved the way the leather creased when they walked. And I was obsessed with this. There was something about how the leather creased. I can't explain what that was about. I mean, it sounds very fetishy, but it was, it wasn't coming from that place. Maybe it was, I don't know. I don't have a shoe thing, a foot thing. I may have other fetishes. It's not this group. I'm kidding. So, anyway, I was talking to my friend Carolyn, who's an artist. She's an amazing artist, and we were talking about, when you talk to some people, like, I think a lot of you are creative people that are here today, and they'll say, and you'll talk to somebody and they'll go, I have no I'm not creative at all, I can't draw at all, or, I just have no creative flow. How do you do that? And which is funny to me because, it's like, how do you come up with ideas? I was talking to somebody recently, and she said, I cannot just paint out of my head. If I try to paint, I have to look at an object, and she said, how do you do it, like abstract work or whatever? And I said, imagination. One word, it's your imagination. It's what, maybe you have to be, I don't know. It's like what makes an artist, what makes a creative person. Why do I have a connection to my imagination and maybe somebody else doesn't? Everybody is creative. Everything is creative because what is creativity? It's just making choices in your life that maybe involve what you're going to wear that day, or what color, paint. Creativity lives in our lives. It's everywhere. A lot of the work I'm doing now, just to talk about scale, is bigger. But when I started out, I was working smaller mostly, and a lot of what I do, you have to go in close, to really see what's there. And a lot of people were asking me, why don't you work bigger? Why don't you work bigger? And I'd be like, why don't you shut the fuck up? Don't tell me how to work, I will, I'll get there. I want to work bigger, of course, but I mean, what the constraint is, well, it's two things. I think it has to do, I'm very honest, with the expansion and the knowing, like, can I own this big space and will I still have something to say, you know? I love Orange and Black. I mean, it is so compelling to me. It's so rich, it's so sexy, and I love deep saturated color. I like the idea of course, light and dark, of death and life. You know, the things that resonate in me as a human being. So, you know, going back to how I approach, you know, how I do my work. A lot of times I'll just start to go in and I'll have maybe a very, you know, some idea, but I get ideas as I work because I start to see things, things, you know, speak to me. So it is a pretty visceral experience. I'm playing a lot. That's why I love painting, because I love it. It's almost like you're a child with your crayons, you know. And I love to play. So, you know, and sometimes whatever I think the narrative, if you will, they don't know how narratives, but something that I'm trying to convey, it either will come in early or will come in later. It really depends, but basically you know, sometimes I have a very distinct idea, or sometimes I literally put down, I see one image, and I'll use it, or I'll put down two colors and go from there. I try to always, I am political, you know, I'm a pretty political person. I want to say something in the work as much as I can, but it doesn't always have to be something literal, of course. I wanted something to juxtapose that was more, she's crying, and really, I wrote this down, but I wanted to juxtapose as something that was the antithesis. And in Mexican culture, she's a symbol of justice because she holds an appeal to the poor and to the marginalized people. And in the modern day, we see her as representing people standing against oppression. But I love the juxtaposition of modernity and of people closer to the earth and of people of color, and I love masks and color. So really, again, I played. Yeah, so I think that, you know, what I want to say as an artist and what I want to continue to work on is obviously to work bigger. So you have a question?
That's more of a comment. I just want to say I'm always just so touched by your vulnerability this evening, the way you're speaking. And you've always spoken that way as part of who you are. You do it in front of people. I'm very touched by that. It's just expressing the intricacies of your life. And I don't think I've ever heard artists talk so much about how they work, down to paper versus canvas versus wood, and the way color affects you, your duality, just seeing this center one split, right in the middle there, and just hearing you talk about it, it's just made the work even more alive to me. And as artists, I think a lot of artists who generally have a great insecurity, and that's admirable, but yet and I think that's probably within you, but yet at the same time, you express yourself with such confidence. And that was just very touching. Thank you.
You have to, love what you do in a sense, right? Even though, of course, I have insecurity. Not many, but kidding.
I one question.
Sure.
You were talking about that you project or try to project duality on your work. And I have a question about the paintings, you know, the ones over there, the mask paintings.
Yeah.
Because whenever I think about duality, it's like opposites, right? So in these two, is that in opposition or
No,
what?
not necessarily. No, I mean, duality, I don't think it has to have that friction necessarily. It's just more of a fragment or a split. But, yeah, I mean, that duality wasn't the main motivation for those, but it was something that I wanted to add just as a, just as a fragment, if you will. But I know what you mean. You're right. It's like duality is hard in a literal sense to, I think, convey at some level, but it is something that I feel very strongly in my personal life, Yeah.
I could talk to you all day.
That's
I liked also what you said about your process. Every artist has a different process, and I'm just fascinated with that. And what you said about how you look at something, you don't draw it all out. You know, some artists have things very planned. And this is like, but it seems like your process is part of your experience. You'll start with something. Oh, I want to paint a gay woman and that's a start. What else is going to happen? I have no idea.
Right.
And then you start it. Whatever's going on becomes a part of that. You're not controlling it all. You're letting something control you as well, and that's just spiritual to me almost. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been that kind of person that was really like right brain, I think it is. Is it right brain or left brain? I think it is. Like sometimes I just literally hallucinate images in the work, or I start to see things for. It blocks me personally to have too much, intellectual thought, although you need it, obviously. It's a balance all the time. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody.